From the forests located near production areas, groups of wild boars began appearing with increasing frequency. They continuously moved down into fields, open land, and crop areas instead of staying only near the forest edges as before. Each group usually consisted of 3 to nearly 10 animals moving together before quickly spreading in different directions as they entered deeper into the production zones. Residents repeatedly saw the groups crossing fields during both the day and the night. Some groups returned to the exact same locations for many consecutive days and continued expanding their activity range around the agricultural areas. Major damage quickly appeared after repeated waves of wild boar invasions. The soil in the middle of the fields was dug up, leaving long trenches after each passage of the groups. Numerous crop rows were trampled, making many areas difficult to recover in a short time. Even more concerning was that the boars often returned to the exact places that had already been damaged before. In many residential areas, yards and grass fields also began to be heavily torn up. The affected range continued spreading to many other production areas nearby. Many new plots of land that had previously been untouched also started showing footprints and feeding traces left by the wild boars. After the level of damage became more severe, trap systems began being deployed at several key locations around the production areas. Some circular traps were installed on wide open ground in order to hold many animals at the same time when the groups gathered together. Steel frames were firmly secured to the ground to withstand strong impacts when the trapped animals panicked inside. The trap doors were kept fully open to create a natural feeling as the groups approached the baited areas. Some locations also included extra bait around the entrances to lure the groups deeper into the traps. While the trap systems remained in position, monitoring activities continued constantly in order to determine the exact times when the groups appeared. Cameras and observation equipment were deployed around many areas where footprints and feeding traces were frequently found. At night, infrared lights continuously scanned the paths between the fields to record the activity of the groups in the darkness. Drones were also used for aerial observation, helping identify clear movement routes between the forests and the production areas. Multiple monitoring teams took turns checking the trap zones to avoid missing the moments when the groups appeared during the night. During the following appearances, the wild boars gradually moved closer to the baited areas. The first animals usually moved quite slowly and continuously observed their surroundings before entering the traps. They circled around the edges of the traps for a short time before moving deeper toward the food area. Once no danger was detected, the animals behind quickly followed in small groups one after another. The number of animals inside the trap steadily increased after each continuous movement of the groups. As soon as the right moment appeared, the entire trap system was activated almost simultaneously. The steel doors slammed shut extremely quickly and blocked every escape route before the groups could react. Only seconds later, the entire area became chaotic as the trapped animals rushed in different directions searching for a way out. Some animals charged violently into the steel frames but still could not break through the firmly secured structure. Additional traps around the area were also activated to prevent the groups from scattering in other directions during the containment process. After the control operation was completed, the wild boars were kept stable inside the system before being transported away from the production areas. As the number of groups decreased, the destructive pressure on agricultural areas also gradually declined over time. Residents continued monitoring the area in order to reduce the possibility of the groups returning during future waves. When wolves and mountain lions gradually disappeared from the forests of Arizona, another species quietly began taking over the dominant role. It was the wild boar. No longer confined to remote wilderness areas, they were moving closer and closer to residential communities, devastating crops, tearing up the ground, and leaving many farmers living in fear every time nightfall arrived. The emergency call from a soybean farm early that morning was the first sign that a new wave of intrusion had begun. We immediately loaded all the equipment into the pickup truck and rushed straight to the scene. The moment we arrived, chaos unfolded before our eyes. A massive wild boar had gotten its leg trapped in an agricultural mesh fence at the edge of the field. But instead of panicking, it became more aggressive than ever. Every time someone moved closer, the animal instantly charged forward, slamming violently into the barrier as if trying to destroy everything in front of it. It was obvious that ordinary fences could never withstand the strength of a hundreds of kilograms beast driven into a frenzy. By observing the torn-up soil stretching from the field to the nearby forest, we quickly identified the herd's well-worn travel route. This was no longer the problem of a single animal. If nothing was done immediately, the entire area would continue to be destroyed within the next few nights. Specialized steel trap systems were deployed at once along the paths with the freshest tracks and mud. Every position was carefully calculated based on wind direction, feeding habits, and the wild boar's incredibly sensitive sense of smell. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight touched the forest edge, I slowly approached the first trap with an indescribable sense of tension. Inside was a gigantic male nearly 5 feet long and weighing around 150 kilograms. The raised bristles running along its spine made it appear even more terrifying. At the slightest sound, the beast instantly spun around and slammed into the steel frame, producing deafening crashes that echoed throughout the forest. But the operation was far from over. We continued waiting until darkness completely covered the fields. Silence stretched on for hours before the surveillance cameras finally began sending signals. From the dark forest, the entire herd emerged, slowly moving toward the trap along the exact route we had predicted earlier. The scent of the captured boar combined with the bait caused them to lower their guard. One by one, they lowered their heads and crawled through the angled entrance of the steel trap. The moment the last boar stepped inside, the trapdoor mechanism activated instantly. The heavy steel gate slammed hard against the ground. The entire herd erupted into panic at once. Violent impacts repeatedly crashed against the steel frame, making the metal shake violently. But the more they struggled, the deeper the edge of the gate dug into the soil. There was no longer even the slightest gap left for escape. At another location nearby, the vertical gate trap also proved effective. A lone wild boar confidently walked inside to feed, completely unaware of the collapsing mechanism waiting above its head. With just the slightest touch, the steel door dropped with a thunderous crash into the darkness of the night. Startled, the animal slammed itself against the cage walls, spinning wildly inside the cramped space, but the mechanical lock had already sealed shut completely. As dawn approached, the most dangerous part had only just begun. We had to move these animals out of the area under absolute safety conditions. The truck was backed tightly against the trap entrance, and heavy straps were secured to the transport cage. Relocating wild boars demanded calmness and precision down to the very second. One small mistake was all it would take for the animal to turn back and charge directly into the steel barrier with tremendous force. After hours of tension, the entire herd of wild boars was finally removed from the area. The farm became quiet once again, but we understood that the peace would never last forever. As the cold season arrived and food sources in the forest continued to disappear, other herds would inevitably return. And when that happened, these steel traps would once again rise along the forest edge, ready for another confrontation.
Yep.
Collection.
We had been setting traps for 7 straight days, but what finally appeared at the end still left everyone stunned. After the last net trap deployment, I realized the wild boars had changed. The net traps no longer caught them off guard. They no longer moved in large groups like before, and they stopped rushing toward baited areas so easily. Their tracks were still there, but far more scattered and sparse. What stood out the most was that they always stopped right before the locations where traps had previously been set. Everything was becoming much more difficult. I knew I needed a different approach, a trap large enough to control the entire herd quickly and efficiently. The first trap was set in broad daylight inside a clearing deep within the pine forest. Everything was carefully arranged, hidden well enough to avoid raising the boar's suspicion.
Toby.
When night fell, they finally began to appear. One by one, they followed the scent of food into the large enclosure. And once the entire herd had moved far enough inside, the trapdoor suddenly slammed shut. The next morning, the sounds echoing from inside were enough to tell me the trap had worked exactly as planned.
Business. Yep.
Two more traps were placed just outside the farm's open field, a location that seemed far too exposed and lacking any real cover. I honestly didn't expect much from that area. But the results turned out to be the complete opposite of what I imagined. After just one night, the number of wild boars caught inside was far greater than I expected. As I walked closer to inspect the traps, the sight inside genuinely shocked me. Somehow, the herd had let its guard down in a way I never thought possible. Violent crashes echoed non-stop against the metal frames, making the entire atmosphere feel more tense than ever before.
Hip.
The final traps were placed deep inside a dense pine forest where sunlight barely reached the ground and where the boars usually moved with almost no caution at all. We set the traps along an old trail where their tracks were still clearly visible. Every detail was carefully calculated, from the position of the drop gate to the way the bait was spread to make everything appear as natural as possible. Once everything was finished, the team left the area and allowed the forest to fall completely silent again. As darkness settled over the woods, the cameras began capturing the first movements. Out of the shadows, the wild boars slowly emerged. At first, only a few approached cautiously, moving slowly while sniffing the air around them. But little by little, more of the herd gathered around the trap site. And once the entire group had moved deep enough inside, the gate suddenly slammed shut, the sound tearing through the silence of the forest. Instantly, the entire herd erupted into panic. Their screams echoed through the trees alongside the violent impacts against the steel frame and the constant rattling of metal. The entire trap shook violently under the force of the desperate animals trying to escape. After completing the inspections, we began processing the traps one by one. Even as the boars continued reacting violently inside, every step had to be carried out with absolute precision. Guiding them out and loading them onto the trucks was far from simple. Every movement required careful coordination and precise timing to avoid dangerous situations. From the aggressive adults to the piglets crowded behind them, each animal had to be controlled and transported back to the holding site. This was no longer just an ordinary hunt. It had become a large-scale effort to control a wild boar population far bigger than we originally expected. And when everything was finally over, the forest slowly returned to its natural silence, as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew very well this was only part of a much longer battle ahead. What we accomplished today was necessary to keep the situation under control before the wild boars once again pushed everything beyond its limits.
That is right there, buddy.
What would you do if you woke up one morning and discovered that the land around your farm was covered in wild boar tracks? Mud trails torn apart, fences bent out of shape, and rows of soil ripped open as if a storm had swept through overnight. That was the moment I realized this nightmare was far from over. I had believed the wild boars were gone after the last round of traps. But that night, they came back in greater numbers, more aggressive than before, and seemingly no longer afraid of anything. a chilling thought suddenly crossed my mind. What if they had returned for revenge? Of course, it was only a feeling, but after seeing the destruction they caused, I understood that if I didn't act immediately, this entire farm could be destroyed within just a few nights. Newly planted fields would be trampled flat, the irrigation system would be torn apart, and the livestock would live in constant panic. I had no choice left except to set more traps and stop them before it was too late. That same afternoon, I began inspecting the entire area surrounding the farm. I followed the narrow trails leading into the forest, studying the fresh tracks pressed into the damp soil and the patches of earth that had been torn up during the night. Just by looking at the way they moved, I could almost predict the herd's direction and habits. Wild boars always return to places where they feel safe, and if I wanted to control them, I had to stay one step ahead. As darkness slowly fell, I carried all the equipment out of storage and joined the others as we moved toward the marked locations. The first trap was placed at the edge of the western forest, right beside a trail covered in fresh tracks. I secured the steel frame into the ground, carefully checked the trap door mechanism, and scattered bait around the entrance to lure the boars inside. The scent quickly spread through the cold, damp night air. After that, we continued setting more traps around the farm before finally leaving, abandoning the area to an eerie and unsettling silence. The next morning, I froze the moment I reached the very first trap. Inside the steel cage was an entire group of wild boars packed together in panic. They kept slamming against the metal bars, creating deafening crashes that echoed through the forest. But what truly made me tense was what I found when I approached the second trap.
I got 1, 2. Aren't you cute? Let's go. Come on, pig.
Even from a distance, I could already hear the chaos erupting inside. As I got closer, the scene before me was far worse than anything I had imagined. The wild boars inside were almost completely out of control. The largest one repeatedly hurled itself at the trapdoor with all its strength, causing the steel frame to shake violently with every impact. Behind it, the others shoved and trampled over one another in blind panic. For a moment, I honestly thought the entire trap was going to explode apart. The third trap was even more horrifying. Long before I reached it, I could hear a deep, relentless pounding sound, as if some massive force was desperately trying to break free. When I finally stepped closer, I could hardly believe my eyes. The cage was packed so tightly with wild boars that there was almost no empty space left. They were crushed against one another, forming one giant mass of chaos. The ones in front kept smashing violently into the steel bars while those behind continued pushing forward, placing tremendous pressure on the entire trap.
Trying to keep you alive here.
final trap surprised me in a completely different way. Inside were mostly young wild boars. They were smaller, faster, and constantly shoving through the cramped space. Even though they were not strong enough to create impacts like the adults, I understood that they were the real long-term threat. If they grew up and continued breeding, this farm would never know another peaceful night again. After checking every trap, I stood silently in the middle of the torn-up land and stared toward the distant forest. But the longer I looked, the more I realized something even more terrifying. This was not the end. Out there, hidden within the darkness of the woods, there were undoubtedly more herds silently watching. And sooner or later, they would return.
You would be absolutely shocked to see what's left behind after a massive herd of wild boars tears through an entire area in just one night. They are no longer appearing only in wide cornfields. Now, residential neighborhoods have become one of their regular targets, bringing endless trouble to families across the United States. According to the USDA, the feral hog population has exploded to around 6.9 million animals and spread across at least 35 states. In Texas alone, they have already invaded nearly 73% of the entire state. Farms are constantly being destroyed, crops are wiped out, and agricultural damage keeps getting worse every year. But the most alarming part is this. The crisis has continued for years with almost no signs of slowing down. It is becoming a problem that people simply can no longer ignore. According to USDA APHIS, agricultural losses and feral hog control costs in the United States have now reached roughly $2.5 billion every year. In the wild, where there are almost no natural predators capable of controlling them, feral hogs reproduce at an alarming rate and have gradually become true survival machines that will eat almost anything, even other hogs when food becomes scarce. They move in massive groups, tear up the ground, destroy crops, and leave entire areas looking like disaster zones overnight. This uncontrolled population boom has created an entire high-tech trapping industry, where many local residents now make a living doing dangerous wildlife control work. While most people are asleep, these trappers quietly check trap lines in the dark, push deep into the woods, and face constant dangers ranging from venomous rattlesnakes to giant feral hogs trapped inside steel cages. For them, this is not just a job. It is a tense battle against one of the most destructive invasive species in America. To fight back against these monsters, the American trapping industry has developed systems capable of capturing entire sounders in a single activation. One of the most advanced technologies is the remotely controlled drop trap system developed by companies like Big Pig Trap. The entire trap is suspended above the ground, leaving the area underneath completely open and free of obstacles. Because of that, the whole herd can naturally walk underneath and feed together without sensing danger. Once every hog is fully inside the trapping zone, the operator simply presses a button on a smartphone, and the massive steel frame instantly crashes down within seconds. However, even these modern systems still have weaknesses. If the bait is not placed perfectly in the center, hogs standing near the edges may escape before the trap fully drops, or worse, become pinned underneath the heavy steel frame. To solve this problem, a local trapper nicknamed Big E, owner of a wildlife control business, designed his own custom drop trap system. His trap looks like a true mobile fortress, strong enough to withstand the violent impacts of full-grown feral hogs. The entire frame is welded from thick steel, surrounded by heavy-duty metal mesh, and reinforced with solid steel bars across the top to prevent the animals from jumping out. The whole system hangs from a four-legged structure built with high-strength steel tubing. Once the trap slams down, there is almost no chance of escape. The feral hog crisis across the southern United States is becoming one of the most expensive lessons in wildlife management history. From just a few domestic pigs released into the wild centuries ago, they have grown into an ecological disaster, causing nearly $2.5 billion in damage every year. Fields ripped apart, gardens destroyed, and wetlands devastated daily are clear reminders of what happens when an invasive species is introduced into a balanced ecosystem. Once the natural order is disrupted, native wildlife across the entire region begins to suffer under enormous pressure. And as the damage continues to grow more severe, one major question still remains. How can humanity create a better balance between development and nature in the future? If you know any effective trapping methods or useful wildlife control tips, feel free to share them in the comments below.
It's causing big
Deep inside Florida's vast wetland preserves, where palm forests, dense reeds, and winding waterways stretch across tens of thousands of acres, wild hogs can move almost completely undetected. For months, a wildlife research team led by Daniel Harper has been tracking their movements through the swamp. The group has been studying how these hogs survive and expand their range between marshland forests, protected reserves, and farmland near residential communities. Their biggest goal is to determine whether the hogs are regularly leaving the wilderness and moving into nearby farms and neighborhood stock. One of the biggest concerns is the growing agricultural damage across Florida. Farmers report that cornfields, peanut farms, and grazing pastures are being torn apart overnight.
Apps are being deployed to catch more hogs.
But an even greater threat comes from the possibility of disease spreading to the feral hog population. Experts fear that as their numbers continue to rise, the animals could carry dangerous diseases closer to livestock operations and residential areas. Wild hogs are now appearing near people more often than ever before, with massive tracks showing up beside highways, near neighborhoods, and even around open garbage sites. Recently, biologists have become especially concerned about the possibility of African swine fever entering the United States through contaminated food products or illegal transportation activity. Although the disease has not appeared in Florida, outbreaks around the world have pushed wildlife officials to increase surveillance efforts. The virus spreads extremely fast and can survive in animal carcasses, mud, or contaminated food sources for long periods of time. Because of that, tracking the hogs' established travel routes has become a top priority, so high-risk areas can be isolated quickly before any outbreak spreads further. Data collected from infrared cameras and tracking devices eventually allowed the research team to map the exact travel corridors most frequently used by wild hogs throughout the Florida wetlands. The animals do not wander randomly. Instead, they follow familiar pathways along forest edges, canal banks, and soft ground where food is easy to find. After months of monitoring, the team began placing large steel cage traps at key intersections between these routes. Inside the traps, they use fermented corn and strong-smelling bait to lure entire sounders back along their normal paths, while surveillance cameras continue recording throughout the night to study the behavior of each group and determine the best moment to activate the traps. At first, the hogs reacted cautiously to the unfamiliar metal structures appearing deep in the swamp. They constantly stopped to sniff the air, circled the area, and quickly disappeared back into the darkness. Some dominant hogs even returned multiple times just to watch the trap from a distance before the rest of the sounder dared to move closer. But after several days without sensing danger, their caution slowly faded, and the animals eventually began returning to the trap sites almost every night. By understanding these movement patterns so precisely, the research team could calculate the ideal trap locations to control entire groups at once. That becomes especially important if disease outbreaks ever occur in the future, because these traps are no longer used only for research. They are now becoming strategic control points within Florida's growing field surveillance system. As the trapping system became more reliable, researchers were able to collect even more data on the wild hog population, while also building a rapid response strategy in case disease is ever detected among feral animals. The traps have now become part of a much larger monitoring network designed to control hog populations along critical travel corridors before they spread deeper into farmland and residential areas. The tracking data also allows researchers to quickly identify the zones that would need immediate containment if infected animals were ever discovered. In the future, studies like this may help Florida manage its exploding wild hog population more effectively, while still preserving the fragile natural balance of its swamp ecosystem style. Across the massive fields of Texas, a silent war unfolds every single night. Huge groups of wild hogs storm into farms, tearing up the ground and destroying entire crops within just a few hours. What makes the situation even more alarming is that these animals are not only powerful, but also incredibly intelligent. They quickly learn how to avoid traditional control methods and become harder to stop over time. As the damage continues to grow, many ranchers have started using giant steel trap systems capable of capturing entire sounders at once instead of targeting individual hogs. The problem became far more serious when signs of wild hog activity began appearing across nearly all of Texas. From dry hills and cornfields to forests near rivers, the ground is constantly being ripped apart by large groups searching for food. Cameras placed around farms regularly capture dozens of hogs moving through properties every night. Today, Texas is believed to have the largest wild hog population in the United States, with more than 2.6 million animals. Over the years, these hogs have adapted extremely well to harsh environments and can survive by eating almost anything. That is exactly why massive steel traps started appearing across large ranches in Texas. Unlike traditional small traps, these systems are built in large circular shapes using heavy steel panels, creating what looks like a fortress in the middle of an open field. The circular design makes the inside appear more natural, helping reduce the hog's suspicion as they enter. The heavy steel gate is connected to a remote control system operated through a mobile phone, allowing ranchers to trigger it from a long distance away. Trap locations are carefully chosen, usually near water sources or along routes that hogs frequently use while moving at night. Once the trap is installed, ranchers spread corn around the area for several days, so the hogs become comfortable with the location. In the beginning, the gate remains completely open so the animals see it as a safe feeding area. Infrared cameras monitor how many hogs enter each night. When the entire sounder has moved deep inside the trap, the system is activated remotely. Within seconds, the giant steel gate slams shut and seals off every escape route. In one successful operation, more than 30 wild hogs were captured at the same time. It is considered one of the few methods truly capable of trapping an entire sounder instead of simply making the remaining animals more cautious. Even so, many experts believe traps alone are still not enough to fully control the problem. In areas covering thousands of acres, where the terrain is too large and difficult for off-road vehicles, control teams have started using helicopters to track hogs from the air. Once an operation begins, helicopters fly low over the ground, so observers can easily spot torn-up soil or trails frequently used by the hogs. From above, pilots can quickly locate groups moving along forest edges or across wide-open fields. The moment the sound of the engine fills the air, the hogs immediately scatter in different directions trying to escape. However, the aerial advantage makes it extremely difficult for teams to lose sight of them. The helicopter constantly changes direction to maintain the right distance, while guiding ground crews toward the exact location of the moving sounder. Although highly effective, this method also comes with enormous costs. Hiring a helicopter for wild hog control in Texas can easily exceed $1,000 per hour. Still, many ranchers consider it a worthwhile price if it helps reduce the heavy damage caused each season. From giant steel traps to helicopter pursuit operations, Texas is using nearly every method possible to slow the growing wild hog population. And this battle will likely continue for many years to come. If you found this story interesting, leave a comment sharing which method you think works best. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about agriculture and nature.
Arizona is not the place people usually think of when talking about feral hogs. This is a harsh, dry land where every small water source is precious, and the few surviving fields struggle to endure the relentless heat year-round. Yet even in such unforgiving conditions, feral hogs have begun appearing more and more frequently. They tear up the ground, destroy irrigation systems, and leave the already limited farmland in ruins after only a few nights. What scares people most is that no one truly understands why they are coming here in such large numbers. Are they searching for food, water, or a new place to live? And why do they seem harder to control with every passing day? That is also the reason I am here in Arizona today. If no action is taken soon, the damage will almost certainly continue to spread. My plan is to place 4 traps in 4 completely different areas where signs of feral hog activity are the heaviest. The first trap is a homemade steel cage set beside a small water source where the ground has been torn apart by countless fresh digging marks. After securing the entire steel frame, I begin scattering bait around the area before extending it into a natural trail leading deep inside the trap. In a dry environment like this, the smell of food is almost impossible to ignore. Everything is finished before dark. As night falls, the first dark shapes begin emerging from the distance. They move slowly, constantly sniffing the ground before following the bait trail straight into the trap without realizing what is waiting ahead. By the next morning, when I return to check the trap, the steel door has already slammed shut. Several feral hogs are trapped inside, repeatedly crashing against the iron bars in complete desperation.
Knock down a little bit quick.
The sound of metal impacts echoes through the quiet surroundings, creating an even greater sense of tension than I expected. The second trap is much smaller but reinforced far more heavily, positioned in an open area near the edge of the forest. Because this location offers almost no cover, Everything has to be camouflaged as naturally as possible to avoid making the hogs suspicious. After finishing the setup and spreading bait early in the morning, we retreat to a safe distance to observe. What surprises me most is how quickly the trap becomes active. By the afternoon, it is already packed with feral hogs. Not just a few isolated animals, but an entire group crammed into the tight space, constantly releasing loud, chaotic snorts. But the trap I remember most clearly lies deeper within the open land. When I arrive to inspect it, there is only a single feral hog inside, yet it is far larger than all the others. Its massive body circles endlessly around the narrow cage, its eyes filled with caution and aggression. The animal throws its full weight against the steel bars, producing sharp metallic crashes that echo throughout the forest. Even so, the trap holds firm, keeping the beast locked inside without giving it the slightest chance to escape. The final trap is placed deepest within the forest, where tracks and movement paths from the entire herd are concentrated most heavily. This is also the location where I place the greatest hope. After carefully preparing everything, we leave and allow the forest to sink into silence throughout the night. By the next morning, even from a distance, we can already hear violent commotion coming from inside the trap. As we move closer, the entire group of feral hogs begins thrashing wildly within the cramped enclosure. It is clear that the trap has worked perfectly, capturing the entire herd exactly as planned from the beginning. Then comes the hardest part, relocating all the captured feral hogs. The animals constantly resist, forcing every step of the transport process to be carried out with extreme caution. It takes a long time to safely load them onto the truck without any incidents. And when everything is finally over, the area slowly returns to silence as though nothing had ever happened. But as I look across that dry and unforgiving land, I understand very clearly that what we accomplished today is only a small part of a much longer battle still waiting ahead.